Hi, my name's Stuart Lynch. In this video, we're continuing on with the MyTallies app series, where the focus is on Widget, AppIntents, and Siri shortcuts. And in this video, we'll be creating our first widget with an interactive app intent so that we can update our first tally by tapping on the widget. Now, if you find that this video is too lengthy, make use of the chapter markers that I have in the description so that you can pause at any time of your choosing and return at a later date when you're more refreshed and ready for more. I decided to keep each of the individual sections in this 4-part series as single videos rather than breaking it up into smaller videos. I love getting your feedback, so if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and leave me a comment below. Make sure you ring the bell to enable notifications and get notified whenever a new video is released. And if you want to support my work, you can buy me a coffee. A link is in the description. If you're following along with this series, you can continue on from there, as I am doing here. If you skip that first video, you can download the completed source code from that video from the link in the description. There are several branches in there, and there will be more once the series is complete, so make sure you download the iOS branch, as this is the completed source code from that first video. The First Widget branch contains the completed source code for this video and will also serve as the starter code for the next one. You can just download and expand the zipped archive. The project requires Xcode 16. So our MyTallies iOS app is complete as is right now as a standalone iPhone application. Well, what I want to do in this video and in the next is to introduce some new widgets through a widget extension and show you how you can build both interactive and configurable widgets. You can watch the beginning of that last video. A link is in the description where I show you what the completed project looks like. In this video, we'll start with a simple static widget just to get our feet wet. But in the next video, we'll discard that in favor of a better configurable widget before we dive into Siri shortcuts. So before we create our widget, however, I need to create an app group. And an app group is what is going to allow us to share our Swift data persistent database between the two different targets. To create an app group, you'll need to go to your current project target and change the bundle identifier so that the domain name is your own unique domain. So you can select your app target and go to Signing and Capabilities tab. And right now, if you're working in the starter project or from this completed source code from the last video, the reverse domain name is com.createxsol, which is mine. So change that to your own, but leave the MyTallies part the same. So copy that bundle ID once it's been edited. And then in the Signing and Capabilities tab, click on the plus button and locate app groups. Double click on that entry and you'll get it added to your project. Now, if you're like me, you would have several already appearing in the list from past projects. You can click on the plus button again, and a dialog will appear with the string group followed by a period. And it's after this that you'll paste your bundle ID. The whole string has to be unique across the whole iOS realm, meaning no one else can register this ID, and that's why you need to make yours unique. And then you can click on the OK and the app group will be added. Now, I've already done that when I was testing out this application, so I just have to find it in my list and check on it. In your case, it will likely show up as red text, but you can just tap the refresh button a couple of times and it'll be ready to use. You'll notice that a new entitlements file has been added to your project navigator. Fortunately for us, Swift data is smart enough to register its location with the app group, so as you see when I launch the app, the data is now in my app group, which means that if I create another module or target, if I use the same app group, it too will have access to the content. So let's start by creating our first widget. A widget is a new target where it is completely independent from the other target, and by default will have no access to the content in the other target, whether it be its models or views or indeed the app group. So we'll need to fix that. So from the File menu, choose New and then select Target. Search for Widget and choose Widget Extension, and then click on Next. you can name the extension MyTallies widget. For this widget, make sure that none of these checkboxes are selected, and then finish. And then you'll be asked if you want to activate the widget, so do so. You'll see a new MyTallies widget folder in there, and there are new target files. There's an asset folder and an info plist, but more specifically, there is a MyTallies widget file with a bunch of code in it that I'll get to within a minute. And there's also a MyTallies widget bundle file marked with @main, which means that this is the entry point for our widget. And you can see that the starting view is the MyTallies widget. Well, if we go to the app and look at the targets, we see that there is now a new MyTallies widget target. So in order to share our Swift data with this target, we'll need to enter it into the same app group. So make sure that the target is selected, then tap on the Signing and Capabilities tab, and again tap on the plus button to add the app group. This time, however, you'll locate that app group that you created for your iOS target in the list and select it. So let's return to that file with all of the code. Well, I'm going to collapse these top three functions within the provider struct, and I'll come back to them. Well, you can remove this comment here. And the simple entry is the model that contains the information that you'll display on your widget. Right now, there is a date and an emoji. We're going to have to fix that. And you can see from the MyTallies widget entry view that it has an instance of one of these, and it displays them in a VStack in the widget view itself in the preview. There's another struct, and it's called MyTallies widget. And this is where we will configure what kind of widget it is, the sizes it can have, and the display names that are used when you want to pick it from the widget gallery. So we're building for iOS 17 or later, so iOS 18. So we can remove that conditional else clause. Now we're only going to have one widget. Then these names within the MyTallies widget extension make sense. But I'm going to have a second widget, and this name used for this one does not really define what it's going to be, which is a widget that will display the first tally. So I'm going to refactor and change the name of my Tallies widget here to First Tally widget. And this will also update the pointer in the widget bundle and in the preview. Similarly, I'll rename the view struct here to First Tally widget entry view. And then finally, the simple entry I will rename as First Tally entry. So let's go to the First Tally widget view now and update some of the things in this configuration. First, the kind of widget is a string, and I'm going to rename it to First Tally widget. It has to be unique among all your different widgets. Scrolling down in this, I'll update some other strings as follows. For the display name, I'm going to name it First Tally. And for the description, I'm going to specify the value of the first tally. And I'm going to add a supported families modifier here and specify in an array that I only want to support and design for a small widget. So that's a system small. And then one more thing that I want to do is to use the entire widget of the widget view. So I'm going to specify that the content margins are disabled. Well, a widget can have a timeline that's updated over time. So you could supply your widget with a number of things to display over time, and you can specify what that time interval is. And as you'll see shortly, we're not going to be doing this. We'll be displaying a static view that only updates when the user makes a change in the app or when it dynamically gets changed from within the widget itself. So for the preview, we can remove the second timeline entry. So let's return to the First Tally entry model for the timeline entry, where there are two properties, the date and an emoji. Now, I won't be using the date, but it is required, so we'll need to keep it. However, I can remove the emoji and replace it with something else later. So when I remove that, of course, it breaks our code wherever a timeline entry is recreated. So we'll need to remove that property in all cases. Now I want to replace that emoji with an array of MyTally objects. And this means I'm going to have to query Swift data. So that means we'll need to import Swift data. Now we might be needing a model container object in a number of functions. So at the top of the provider structure here, let me create a container that is of type model container and create it right here within the initializer. We can try to generate a model container for tally.self object, just like we did at our main iOS entry point. And then we'll need to add these parentheses here so that we have an object that we can use in any of our code within the provider. Notice, however, that tally is not recognized. And this is because tally is in our iOS target and not accessible to our widget target. But we can fix that. I can locate and select that tally module file and then reveal the inspector on the right. And then I can show that first tab and see that only MyTallies iOS target is available. Well, I can tap on the plus button and all targets should appear. If they don't, you can simply search for it and they'll appear. And then you can select whichever target you want. So I'm going to select my widget target. So that target now has access to this model and our error goes away. Well, let's create a function within the provider then that can fetch and return all of the query objects as an array. And since this is a view, we can't use the query macro, so we'll need to do it manually. So first, let's create a function called getTallies that could throw an error and returns an array of tally. And we'll need to execute this on the main queue, so we'll decorate it with @mainActor. First, I'll create a sort descriptor array with a single element, and that's going to be a sort descriptor using the key path tally.name. Next, I'll create a descriptor that's a fetch descriptor of type tally, and I can then specify that sort by is our sort. Having this descriptor then, I can get all tallies by trying to use the container's main context to fetch using that descriptor. And then I can return all of those tallies, but it's optional because it could have failed. So I can return an empty array in case that does happen. So I'll be using this function wherever necessary in the functions to get them. And I can use those in my first tally entry, timeline entry. So let me add a tallies property as an array of tally to the timeline entry. And now I can update the different codes to refer to this new property. So we'll need to update our three functions. First, the placeholder. Well, the placeholder function provides a lightweight representation of the widget while its actual data is loading. It uses this to show a temporary view, like a static placeholder UI, so that the widget doesn't appear empty or blank when it first appears or is in the widget gallery. In this case then, for tallies, I'm just going to supply an empty array. In the getSnapshot function, it's used to create a snapshot of the widget's current state for display in the widget gallery or for quick previews. And it's called when the system needs to render a preview of the widget. Well, this is usually a fast operation, possibly using cached or static data, as it doesn't need to fetch real-time information. But in our case, though, we'll need that use that function that we created to fetch all of the entries and pass them in for that entry that is required in the completion closure. First, let me create a current date property. And I'm going to specify that as being date.now. so that I can use that when I create my entry. And then the call to the getTallies function is asynchronous. So I'm going to need a task unit of work. Then I can get all tallies by trying and awaiting the call to getTallies. Once I have them, I can create my timeline entry where the date is that current date and the tallies are my all tallies array. And then I can use this as the argument for our completion handler. The getTimeline function is the core function that provides actual data to the widget over time, and it defines the sequence of entries and when they should be displayed. And this is where you'll fetch live or up-to-date data and create a timeline of entries that the widget will display, with the ability to specify when each entry should be shown, which allows for periodic updates. And this timeline helps the system know when and how often to refresh the widget's content. But as I mentioned, however, at the beginning here, we'll not be updating the widget over time. It'll happen on demand. So I'm going to remove this code and start from scratch. And this is going to be very similar to the getSnapshot function, except that instead of using an entry in the completion, we're going to have to provide a timeline object of type entry. So first, I'll create a current date again using date.now. And then, like before, I'll need a task unit of work to access the async getTallies function. And then we can get all tallies by trying and awaiting that call. We'll create an entry using the current date and all tallies. And now we can create a timeline entry, which is going to require an array of these entry objects. But since we're only going to get one, we can specify that as a single element of the array. And since there is only one, our policy for refresh can be never or at end. Now that I have my timeline, I can use that as the completion parameter. And then finally, then in the preview, we can just pass in an empty array for the tallies. Well, as you can see, the widget view is just showing the time and entry date, which we don't want. So to test this, let me remove this content. And I'm going to check first to see if the entries tallies array is empty. If it is, it means we don't have any tallies. So I'm going to present a content unavailable view with the string no tallies yet. And for a system image, I'll use a plus.circle.fill. Now, if the array is not empty, I know that I can safely unwrap the first one and display the name and value in text views. So else, we'll create a text view using the entry.tallies first name and unwrapping that first tally. And then I can use string interpolation to display the entry.tallies.first's value. So currently the app is using the widget target, so I'm going to switch to the MyTallies target, and I'm going to run the app. Now notice that my first tally is called alpha, and the current value is 3. I'm going to exit to the home screen and then long press on it to bring up the home screen's edit capabilities. If I tap on edit and add a widget, I can search for MyTallies. You'll see that the first tally is a snapshot. Perfect. And I can add it to the desktop, and there it is. If I tap on the widget, it opens the app, and I'm at that first widget. If I increase the tally and return to the home screen, the number has yet to get updated. So I'll need to fix this. We have to go back to the iOS app and go to where the tally is updated. And that's in that single tally view. and it's within the 2 on-tap gestures. So first, to communicate with the widget, we'll need to import WidgetKit. Then, whenever we make a change, we're going to have to use a Widget Center's shared function. And you've got 2 of them. One is the reload timelines, and you can specify a single kind. And we have only one, so we could supply the string. However, I tend to use the other one, which is the reload all timelines. And that way I don't have to worry about which widget. They're all going to get updated. So I can run the app now and see that the current tally is 4. If I exit to the home screen, I see that the widget is accurate. Well, let me tap on the widget to get back, and I'm going to tap on that value to increase the tally. If I return back to the home screen, I'll see that it updates there too. Back in the app, I can double-click to decrease. Back in the home screen, I see it updated. Now, before I move on to improve our widget appearance and to be able to update the tally from the widget, I remember that I could in my app either reset the count or delete a widget or create a new widget, and that new widget may end up sorting to be the first widget. So I'll need to add that shared function in each of those cases as well. And a good way to ensure that you find them all, for me, is that I remember in each case that I update, I also use the save function, the context save. So I'm going to search for that. The last 2 are in my single tally view, and I've already updated those. So I can tap on the first one in the tally selection view. I'll go to the top of the file and import WidgetKit. And then I'll tap on the row and add my call to the Widget Center's shared reload all timelines here. And I'll repeat that for the second one. And then I can repeat that same process for the other remaining file. Well, while we're still on that single tally view, wouldn't it be nice if we could use this for our widget too? Well, we can. Remember, we designed it so that we could pass in a size if I use this view in a smaller environment. So I could specify a smaller font size. First, though, we'll need to reveal the inspector and see what the target membership is. And I see that it's currently only the iOS target, so let's add the widget extension as a target here too. So now I can return to the first tally widget and to the first tally widget view. And in the else clause of our body, I'm going to replace it with a single tally view, providing a size of 60. And the tally will be the entry.tallies.first, unwrapped. So if I run now, I can exit to the home screen and see that my value is displayed nicely. Well, I can tap on the widget and get to the app and increase the tally. Returning to the home screen, it's updated there too. Let's also add the name below it. So I'm going to embed the single tally view in a VStack. And then below it, I'm going to create a text view and provide the entry.tally.first's name. Again, first can be unwrapped. Run the app. Exit to the home screen, and it looks good. Let me switch to dark mode. Great. Now the problem is that when I tap on this widget, it only opens the app. The tap gestures are not recognized. And in iOS 17, we got a way to provide interactive widgets by creating what is called an AppIntent. So in my MyTallies widget folder, I'm going to create a new Swift file, and I'm going to call it update tally intent. When it's created, I'm going to import AppIntents, import Swift data, and import WidgetKit. Next, I'm going to create a struct called updateTallyIntent that conforms to the AppIntent protocol. Well, AppIntents require some things. So first, there's a static title that's a localized string resource. So we can specify this as a string, update first tally. Then we can provide a description, and as you can see, it's optional, but it could be something like this where we ask it to tap the tally once to increment. Now, it also requires a perform function. And it's in this perform function that we'll update the tally and return the value that we'll not use here, but we will in the next video. So let's create another function then to fetch the tally update when incremented. Now this function must execute on the main queue, so let's decorate it with a main actor. And then within here, I can create a model container variable here called container. That's created by trying to create a model container for tally.self. So I want to fetch all of those queries. So let me just go back to where I do that in that function in our widget, and I'm going to copy it from there. I'll paste it in here. And then I can use an if let to find and unwrap the first one. And then I can call that tally's increase function. And then I'll use the container's main context to save. I'll try to save. And then I can call the widget center's shared reload all timelines function here to update the widget and then return the tally.value. Now, if there was no first tally, I'll just return 0, but there will always be 1 if we've got any at all. So back in the perform function then, we can determine what that updated value is by awaiting that call to that update tally function. And then we can return the result passing in as the value of that update. So let me return to the widget view now, where I have that single tally view. And I can create a new button type that uses this view as the button label. Now the button type doesn't have an action, but rather an intent. And that intent is our update tally intent. So I'll also set the style to plain so that it doesn't look like a button. So let me run the app now. And you see when I exit to the home screen and tap on the number value, it increments. Great. If I tap outside of that number button, the app opens and I'm right at that first widget. But look, the number hasn't been updated. Now, if I go to another tally and then back again, I see that it actually had been updated. It just hadn't been refreshed. And the problem is that the update from the widget is updating that subview, and my main view has no idea that it's been updated. So what I can do is trigger a refresh when the app is opened and comes to the foreground or is active. So in the tally selection view, first add an environment variable for the scene phase key path, and I'll call it scene phase. Next, I'm going to create a private state property called ID that is simply just an instance of a UUID. And then we can apply that ID as the ID for the entire VStack. So whenever our scene becomes active, we can change that ID that's going to force our view to refresh. So I'm going to create an onChange modifier for scene phase. And we can remove the old and new values because scene phase will have been updated, and that's all we need to know. And then we can check to see if that scene phase is active. And if so, it means it's been brought to the forefront. So we'll just assign a new UUID to the ID property, and that's going to force a refresh. So let me run the app one more time. I can return to the home screen. I'll tap to increase, say 12. I'll tap outside the number, and the app opens, and I'm shown the value is updated. Well, that's it for this video. And I hope you've learned something here that you can use in your new projects going forward. But there's still more to come. So I hope you join me in the next video of this series where we'll create a new configurable widget that will allow us to select whichever of the tallies I choose so that I can have multiple tally widgets on my screen and each one with a different counter. Now, if you've enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up and leave me a comment below. And be sure to subscribe to my channel and enable notifications so that you're made aware of the new videos that I release. And you can also download my free channel listing app to be able to search for and find content from any one of my close to 350 Swift and Swift UI related videos. Thanks for watching.